Make way for the ultimate showdown of dollars versus maple leaves, ice hockey versus American football, and politeness versus, let's just say, directness. It's that time of the year, yeah, you guessed it right, the time for the epic battle, Canada versus the USA. So step aside, Zuck and Musk, because these two nations are here to steal your spotlight. Both of you, tech giants, can survive a few hours without the attention, right? Before moving on to the debate, remember that no maple syrup or cheeseburgers were harmed while making this video. Let the who's better versus who's just your typical average nation games begin. Number 1. Housing and rent costs. Canada has always been known for its affordability compared to the US, but when it comes to owning a house in this nation, all the bragging right goes straight out the window. I'm sure you'll be thinking, well, look at its opponent. It has to be cheaper than the rich states. Sorry to burst your bubble, folks, because Canada has recently surpassed the US regarding their housing costs. Owning a house in the Great White North can cost you over $630,000. And it's funny, because when I searched for the exact value, the word just was sitting proudly before the 6 digits. Cities like Toronto and Ontario are like the elegant china dishes in our house that says, look, but don't touch. The average home price in Ontario is $850,000, and in Toronto, the price has increased 24% compared to last year, which brings the cost to $1,150,000. The day isn't far away when the prices will start to look like phone numbers. There are some affordable options too, such as Regina and Sherbrooke, where the average home prices are between $250,000 to $400,000. Meanwhile, the average U.S. housing cost is around $450,000, and that's a 32% increase since 2020. It is cheaper than in Canada, but overall the rate is still higher than normal. We have major metropolitan cities like San Francisco, New York City, and Seattle, which are famous for their expensive housing markets where prices range from $500,000 to $800,000. And then we have areas like Oklahoma City, Knoxville, and Little Rock, where prices are between $150,000 to $300,000. Now let's see how the rent prices are doing. After such differences in housing costs, you might think there has to be some good news for rents. Well, stop thinking, because if you're Team Maple Syrup, I'm sorry, but you've lost in the rental category too. The average rent price in Canada for a one-bedroom apartment is $2,000, whereas on the other hand, a one-bedroom apartment will cost you $1,300 in the US. However, if we compare Toronto and New York, then the Big Apple is costlier than the Canadian city. On average, a one-bedroom apartment in New York City costs $3,600, while in Toronto, the same space will cost you $1,500. So, no matter where you decide to settle in, at least at the end of the day, you'll be left with some spare change. I know, who would have thought, right? Number 2. Transportation. While the USA displays smooth highways and speedy connections in its bustling cities, Canada's transportation system can be more cost-effective for long-distance bulk transport. Let's talk about the two nations separately and see which one got your back without breaking the bank. The USA has an extensive transportation infrastructure, from its highways, subways, and railways to air routes. These modes enable people to get across the country faster and more conveniently. However, here comes the trouble. According to different surveys and polls, it was recorded that transportation cost is the second highest expense category in the USA, right after housing costs. On average, per household spends $10,000 per year on transportation, most of which goes to owning a car. Also, there are a couple of reasons for such a high cost, as many Americans reported that they drive too far or too frequently, and not enough people own the fuel-efficient vehicle, and not many take public transport or use bikes. Hence, the number definitely adds up, resulting in the second position for the highest expenditure list. Meanwhile, just like their neighbors down south in the US, Canadians love hitting the road in their cars. But surprisingly, more than 20% of them prefer wind kissing their cheeks and ruffling their hair while riding public transit for their daily commute. Last year, it was reported that in Canada, per household spent much or less $9,000 on transportation, including car services. And the monthly price tag for getting around town will cost you anywhere from $200 to $300. So prepare your wallets before you hop on the bus or the ferry. A monthly pass in Toronto is $156, while in New York City it will cost you $127 per month to get around the city. At the end of the day, it all depends on the specific transportation requirements and mainly the distance, as both countries have similarities and some difficulties. However, you are in for a ride to remember whichever you choose. Number 3. Healthcare. Do I really need to spell out who's what? On the one hand, we got, hey, healthcare's on the house, while on the other side, a person would need a loan just to sneeze, which, by the way, one would hardly be able to pay in his life. Over in the US, the healthcare scene is all about that private insurance model, hence making the nation sit at the top of the highest medical costs category. Per individual pays around $12,000 annually to receive treatment, and if someone wants to know why they had to pay such a hefty amount, then most of the time they are told that the new innovative technologies and prescription drugs are the main reason. But is that all? Definitely not. These are just the tip of the iceberg. The healthcare system has multiple rules that make it complex for consumers. An individual has to choose from several types of health insurance options. Some of these plans may or may not cover prescription drugs with different levels of coverage, deductibles, or co-insurance. For healthcare providers, it's another level of hassle dealing with numerous protocols related to usage and billing. Hence, in the end, these complex activities end up being the biggest chunk of their administrative costs. They probably spend more time doing paperwork than actually treating patients. Along with this, U.S. hospital care makes up about 31% of all healthcare costs. As reported by the Healthcare Cost Institute in 2022, compared to other nations, the prices for inpatient services in the United States are still pretty high. For instance, a hip replacement cost can be anywhere between $26,000 to $30,000, while a C-section can go up to $12,000, with the national average being $23,000 in 2020. A CT scan can range anywhere between $300 to $4,000, so next time someone suffers a fracture, they'll be like, let me grab some duct tape and DIY this. On the other hand, we have the main attraction of Canada. No, I am not talking about Niagara Falls, but about the country's free healthcare system. Canada has a publicly funded single-payer healthcare system known as Medicare. In Canada, Medicare's got your back regarding hospital visits, doctor checkups, and emergency care. When it comes to those prescribed medicines, dental care, and eye treatment costs, you'll have to dig into your own pockets. Now, you must be wondering how the healthcare in the Great White North is paid for. Well, here's the cool deal. Public healthcare is funded through taxes paid by their citizens and residents. The average Canadian chips in around $7,500 Canadian annually for this no-cost system, and most citizens are happy with this decision that helps keep them in good shape. It's like a community effort to keep everyone covered. But hold up. Here's the deal with the free healthcare system. It's exclusively for Canadian citizens and those lucky enough to have a permanent residence permit. So if you've been chilling in Canada for at least 3 months, good on ya. You're now eligible to enjoy the free healthcare system. In a nutshell, Canada's healthcare system takes the crown for being cost-effective and fair. Meanwhile, in the US, it's like someone's hanging on for dear life, but death is at the door like, hey there, first pay up the bill, then we can talk about you peacing out. Number 4. Groceries and dining out. Generally, the cost of groceries in the USA tends to be cheaper than in Canada due to factors like more extensive food production capabilities and a larger agricultural sector. However, the cost can vary depending on specific regions. Canadians spend an average of $200 to $400 per month on groceries, while on average groceries cost between $250 to $350 monthly in America. The cost of dining out in the USA depends on various factors, such as the restaurant type, location, and the dish you order. On average, a meal at a mid-range restaurant can cost anywhere from $15 to $50 per person, including an entree, a beverage, and perhaps a dessert. And if you're on a budget, fast food joints and quick service spots got your back. You can grab a tasty meal for just $5 to $10 per person. However, if you're feeling fancy, prepare for an emotional farewell with your hard-earned dollars. In the world of fine dining, the bill ranges from a whopping $70 to $150 or more for multi-course meals. It's also important to keep in mind that tipping is the second most common practice in the USA right after breathing, and it's customary to tip servers around 15 to 20% of the total bill. So this should be factored in while comparing the cost between the two countries. Meanwhile, dining out in Canada is considered relatively affordable compared to the US or parts of Europe. A typical meal at a mid-range restaurant can range anywhere between $15 to $30 per person, excluding drinks. And if you choose to dine at a fancy place, the meals can cost anywhere between $50 to $100 per person. Fast food options and casual eateries are typically more budget-friendly, with meals ranging from $5 to $15 per person. America takes the crown when it comes to jaw-dropping portions and fast food greatness. Number 5. Jobs and salaries. In 2023, Canada's unemployment rate is 5.4%. And in the US, it is 3.8%. The US job market is known for its diverse opportunities, mainly in technology, finance, and entertainment industries. However, it may also be more volatile due to its larger size and susceptibility to economic fluctuations. And although the tax rate in the US is generally lower, the states tend to have more overtime hours compared to Canada, which emphasizes having a good work-life balance by planning to introduce 4-day work weeks. While the US offers private healthcare plans and better salary packages, Canada provides more generous vacation time, paid travel, as well as paid maternal and paternal leave. Also, note that immigrants often face challenges in finding jobs compared to permanent citizens of both countries. But comparison-wise, securing a job in Canada tends to be more difficult than in the USA. Canadian companies often prioritize candidates with Canadian work experience. meaning an individual born in that country, which immigrants can't compete with. Meanwhile, the situation is not as common in the US, making it easier to find employment there. And when it comes to salaries, the average earned by Americans is $56,000 a year, and in Canada, the average is $53,000. Some Canadian cities also have a more affordable cost of living compared to cities in the US. Honestly, both countries have pluses and minuses on affordability. Each has its own perks and quirks. The US flaunts high-paying jobs and affordable housing costs, but then Canada swoops in with its free healthcare system and lower expenses. Hope you enjoyed this video. US or Canada, which country is the one for you? Comment below and we will see you in our next video.